you could say hapless, effortless, meaningless. It felt like, I mean, lifeless. It was just all kinds of lists.
I do find it interesting that so many of you guys in the comments are still kind of asking about the offense. And again, we'll get to that. But because again, I think when you look at the way that they ran the football, 13 carries, 43 yards for Derrick Henry, 7 for 34 for Spears, but 19 of that came on one. So that was 20 carries for 77 yards, but with like 20 of that coming on one carry, basically 57 yards on 19 carries. That's not exactly doing the job either on the offensive side of the ball. They didn't run the ball well. And again, that's without their best linebacker and their best pass rusher in the game for the majority of for the entire game. So I do want to get to the offense, but again, there's no fixes from the depth at middle linebacker, which we talked about. There's no fixes for the cornerback situation. They did go sign some pass rusher today, some guy. They went and got some defensive lineman.
Yeah,
but they got punked, man. And I assume, and this speaks to the way this team always has functioned under Vrabel, just like they did after the worst loss in franchise history or Vrabel history. They come back and they play very well against the Bengals. I expect them to come back and play pretty well against the Ravens. And so this roller coaster we're on might just
it is technically a home game.
This is the way that people need to get used to this team. And I have a theory I'm going to float to you on the offensive side of the ball, but I think this is the ride you're on this year, guys. Like I had them at 8-9. You might have had them at 9-8. Maybe they win the division. Maybe they don't. Maybe they're going to be good one day and maybe they're going to be bad the next. But this is the roller coaster we bought tickets for. And this is what they're going to do. Let me tell you guys about Sinkers and Kingston Group first. Let's lighten the mood a bit before we talk offense, because the game was terrible, but our sponsors are great. Sinkers, of course, #1 liquor store in the entire city last year, Zach, the defending champs, as voted on by you, according to the Nashville scene. You can search Uber Eats, and if you need a beverage, which I'm assuming most of you do after watching the game, you can just search Uber Eats, Sinkers Beverages right there, and they'll have the booze, whatever you want, delivered directly to your house.
They'll drive so you can drink.
Great bourbon selection. Sign up for the in crowd. Absolutely wonderful helping staff there. They'll pick out everything you need if you need some help with wine, like I do. I'm not good with picking out the wines because I don't know anything about tannins, and whatever else happens in the glass when you put the wine in there. I don't know. I know a lot about bourbon. They know a lot about bourbon. They got great tequila selection, which I'm kind of starting to come around on with tequila. I'm starting to explore tequila, which is a dangerous hobby to have. But Sinkers Beverages has a great selection there and a great selection of all kinds of cool frosty beverages. Great walk-in freezer there with all kinds of beers. And the Kingston Group, buildkg.com. You guys know the drill. Nashville's locally owned custom home and remodeling firm. Just give them a call. Talk to them about design. Talk to them about renovations. Talk to them about buying or selling. A lot of different things they can help you with your house. They don't expect you to use them for everything, but just keep that name up there in the noggin, the Kingston Group. And if you need anything with your house, just make sure you remember that name and talk to them, have a conversation. So my theory on the offense is I think they have some things in place that I really, really like. There's Mike Vrabel, of course, raving about Tajay Spears. I like Spears. I think they should have used him more. I like the scheme. I think Tim Kelly's doing a pretty good job. I think Peter Skoronski back in the lineup at left guard. I think he's going to be a pretty good player for this franchise for a long time. I'd love to see Treylon Burks back out on the field, but I think they've got some nice things to work with. My theory is that Ryan Tannehill and Derrick Henry have topped out.
Mm-hmm.
Like this is Derrick Henry because of age and because of carries and because of workload, and Tannehill a little bit because of age. But also, I just don't think he's suited to I think he has a ceiling, and
his ceiling limits the ceiling of the Tennessee Titans.
Yes, and when they are good, and when things are going well, and they have the right matchups, and Tim Kelly's in rhythm, and even yesterday, almost 270 yards, a lot of drives down the field for Ryan Tannehill. He was force feeding DeAndre Hopkins, who clearly has still got it. Like, there's a lot to like about the offense. They just don't have a high upside ceiling. And the way that Vrabel is going to kind of always be a little bit conservative and maybe lean a little bit more traditional in the style of game, I just think they're limited. And I don't think it's anybody's fault per se, but I think Henry's aging out of the game. At some point, it's going to happen. I think Tannehill's age, but more importantly, I just don't think Tannehill has ever had the skill set to be a top flight modernized NFL quarterback. Frankly, most quarterbacks don't have that skill, but he plays great within the confine of the offense. And if it's open, he can find the guy.
Yeah, it's creating plays out of structure that is the big part of Ryan Tannehill's, I guess you could say, negatives. To me, is like that's the first thing. He doesn't create plays out of structure. I want to venture into the red zone eventually, but I want to talk about where I'm at with Ryan Tannehill. Ryan Tannehill is a good quarterback. He is a 60%, 20% is elite, 60% can win you games, and 20% just suck. He's firmly in the 60%. The problem is your surroundings are leaving you behind. And he can only do so much. And when you are in a league that right now, if you want to be considered top flight week in and week out, you have to have your quarterback of the future. And this dipping the toe in the water, half in, half out, with Ryan Tannehill this offseason, with their plans for the future of the quarterback, is coming back to bite them in the ass. And the problem is that unless the Titans are in a position where they are firmly and concretely, like definitively out of the playoffs, they're not going to move away from Ryan Tannehill barring an injury.
Yeah.
And that is where you're at, which hurts the team in a different way because, yes, you can find out certain things about your quarterback's progression behind the scenes. You don't necessarily have to have games. But if you can find them in in-game situations, sometimes people study better than they play or they test, and some people test better than they study. So you're not being able to find out because you have handcuffed yourself to a middling average quarterback, which we have been proponents. Trade them all offseason. Like, this is not new that they should have traded them. But because they have not done that and have taken this half in, half out mentality, it has blown up in their face. And it's probably going to do more harm than good later on down the road. Tannehill's not the issue outside of the Saints game. You can put the Saints game squarely on him. That is that. The Cleveland game is an epic disaster on all levels, and he was mainly one of the better spots of the day, which is not saying much.
No,
but he was one of the better spots of the day. The issues that I have where I feel like his ceiling limits, but when you get into the red zone, and they got into the red zone a lot because of Ryan Tannehill and DeAndre Hopkins' connection. He has a 102.8 passer rating inside the red zone. He has 17 attempts in the red zone.
Is that just this year?
That is this year.
This year?
Yeah. I'm not including anything else. Just this year. So that tells you right there. This year, 17 attempts, 102.8 passer rating. The problem is that they are giving the ball to Derrick Henry in the red zone and turning into a completely different offense where Derrick Henry has 11 attempts for 1.09 yards per attempt. He has gone for 12 yards. And now you may say, but Zach, he probably got a lot of goal line carries inside the 5, 2 out of the 11.
Yeah.
So when they're outside, when they're in between the 10 and 19-yard line, he's got 6 attempts for 0.33 yards per attempt. That's damaging. And the other issue is that inside the red zone, Tyjae Spears has gotten 1 carry, and that 1 carry went for a touchdown. And listen, and it's mainly because Derrick Henry was on the field, but that means you have to get creative with Derrick Henry, and Derrick Henry is almost better used at this point in his career because he cannot create plays out of structure, kind of like Tannehill right now. Maybe a distraction.
Unless he's a quarterback, in which case he's been pretty good in the red zone, Derrick Henry. No, but to your point, I think your entire points are all encompassed into the Tyjae Spears touchdown. Mm-hmm. Because not only was it giving Spears the ball, it was also creative play call and design at the right time, and it was getting a dynamic weapon out in space. It was doing something that, like, it was all different than what you normally see. And I think that one play is sort of all these issues wrapped into one. And like when even 2 weeks ago, they scheme Nick Westbrook-Akine open on a creative play to come into the backfield and get open, and Tannehill makes a good throw, and because that was the design of the play. And Ed says this Tannehill's not the problem, but he's also not the answer.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
I think that's 100% correct. I do think you and I can have a longer conversation about if it does hurt the team as much as you're saying long term, if it's going to do damage. I think that's an interesting conversation we can have, because I remember standing on the practice field on the very first day of practice of OTAs. I remember talking to somebody inside the team, and we were kind of like all looking at Will Levis for the first time, right? It was all of our chances to actually see him on a practice field with like a uniform on and helmet and pads and stuff. And we're all like, man, we're all talking about Will Levis. And I kind of was just chatting with somebody that works for the Titans. I just said, look, this is a pretty decent luxury to compete for a division championship while bringing along your guy and rebuild on the fly is sort of their terminology, which is fine. That's fine. I don't think it hurts them to try to make the playoffs, quote unquote, with Ryan Tannehill as much in the future. I don't know if that really like damages the franchise.
Well, I feel like if what I mean by that is like if you wait to play Will Levis next year and you think that he's something that he's not because you saw him good in practice,
yeah,
and then that's kind of like, oh, that's not very good.